Okay, so I I think what I listen. I want to tell y'all a crazy story. Okay. Um I've always had a hard time talking about these experiences. I have not had a hard time talking about most of my experiences in my life, to be honest. In fact, I tend to kind of be more willing to talk about a lot of different experiences. Um, I guess it's a way to try to make sense of what I've gone through, um, to kind of almost mask these other things, because I haven't exactly known how to process them. And I'm at a point now where I still don't actually know how to process them. Um, but I know that this is what I'm being led towards and that this is part of the process. Firstly, is communicating them and being able to communicate them. There's been a couple times I've kind of like edged about these stories. Um, but yeah, think, okay, so in my last video, I was talking about, not knowing exactly what message or whatever I'm supposed to be putting out. Then I went through a series of all these different things I want to talk about. The core of everything, the core of all of it. What story do you want me to tell, universe? Like, the core of all of my experiences has revolved around, and I kept making jokes in this last video about me being cursed and people cursing me. But I mean, it's a joke. It is. It's not funny. It's not. I just have a really, really, really bad sense of humor. But that's how I've survived, is by finding the irony in these experiences. At the same time, trying to always find the positive and not really being able to look at these things just as they are has kind of created this weird world where there's a bit of fantasy, a bit of disillusionment, a bit of dissociation, a lot of just ego masking in general. And because of that, I think that that is likely where a lot of the seeming confusion a lot of people have about me, I'm just complicating it more by not being able to say things outright. Okay, all right, my cursed ass. Okay, so the thing is, I'm not trying to incriminate people. I'm aware that witchcraft is like a serious, it's a serious thing, and if people, I don't think most people actually take it seriously, and that if people were to take it seriously, that it says some things about people, and generally speaking, I'm aware that the way that it's looked at in society is anybody that's practicing witchcraft is psychopaths that are capable of killing people. And in my own experience, I've met a lot of people, and okay, it's very hard for me to communicate these things without projecting or protecting, because I'm aware of the stigmas about a lot of things, right? But kind of how I want to go about this, and I've thought about it before, coming to write a story, but I love to write, and I'll write at some point. I'll do something with this, but I just need to get it out a certain way. Um, there'll be times where I get super fantastical about the way that I'm explaining things. Um, I'm hoping that I can express these things in a way that is artistic, so that it's understood in the expression more than uh, in maybe even the words themselves. Only because my experience is very biased. It's so extremely personal, and I have struggled with mental health most of my life. Like I said in the last video, it wasn't until I was 30. It wasn't until 2020 that I even um, had any like real balance or sense of like release from PTSD and depression. Um, and I don't know. So like I'm aware, and just who I am as a person. Like I don't want to take away from the truth because of who I am as a person, right? And it's very easy to do just based on our personal bias. So like when I express these things, I'm hoping that I can express, and I'm praying that they will be received in a way where I've expressed them, um, just very genuinely, so that like people can kind of weed through to figure out what the realities of these things are. I will say before I really start getting into this that I did just watch this short film randomly yesterday on YouTube. It was this short horror film. I don't remember what it was called. It was random. I don't remember what it was called, but like there was this dude who was a doctor who could go into people's dreams, and uh, he was helping people kind of like fight their demons through their dreams. And it's in people with sleep paralysis and shit, or like really crazy issues with their dreams. And then you find at the end that what he's actually doing is um, finding the narcissists and psychopaths and sociopaths in people's lives that have abused them or traumatized them in different ways and caused them to create these types of delusions. So essentially, what it is saying is that, like, generally, ghosts and paranormal experiences don't exist, or at least not. There's some, it wasn't saying like a blanket statement by any means, but that often, I guess, that could be a reason that people, and that is often a reason that people experience certain types of experiences, is because it's actually the brain's way of surviving and trying to process in order to survive through things that would otherwise completely break the psyche. It's things that aren't understood, and it's just the brain's way of trying to make it understandable. Um, and it comes across in a lot of different ways, but that's also why we tend to share in those same types of delusions. Like it's not that they're not really there. It's not that we don't really manifest those things. We do, but we manifest those things. And like, I think I even knew that all the time then, but was struggling with those concepts, especially because those concepts were coming from within me, where externally there was an extremely strong presence of Christian indoctrination, of Christian legalism. Even though in our home we swore that that wasn't what we were doing, but we were just doing it in our own way, in a culty weird way, in an incestuous way in our family, so that we didn't have to cater to the ways that the churches were doing it. But then we were like staying in these small little culty churches where we could have the space to kind of have that weird little cult in our family. I don't know, those kind of dynamics really fucked with me for sure. And so I would say that like those types of things, and like the more that I can explain different experiences that I have had, the more that these things tend to make sense. Like that's really what I'm trying to do through all of this, I suppose, is just trying to make sense of my experience. Especially as somebody who was raised so like religiously, but also not. Like we were very theoretical about it, but like also very, like I said, like legalistic, but somehow like casual, but like for sure serious. And like the hypocrisy was so deep. I mean, it really fucked with me. The religious abuse is, I mean, that's what it, even if it wasn't intended to be, that's what it became for me, for all of us, really. It was kind of just a mind fuck. And so like coming out of that, like in of itself has been quite a process, and it's one that like most people haven't been able to do, or they when they have done it, they've fallen into other more maybe healthier or safer or more sustainable forms of codependency. But when you are raised in a cult, when you are raised in cult mentality, with cult mentalities, when you're raised in an incestuous family, when you're raised in very small sheltered circles, private schools, those types of elitist type spaces, anything like that, like it really preys on your mentality. I forget where I was even going because I was just thinking like with the small spaces that it um yeah, it just makes it really hard for you to be able to like process things normally and to come out of to not fall into more codependent thought processes. I mean, that's just why so many so many of the kids that I grew up with, like people in my generation and stuff, and like I thought our parents' generation was a generation that like had done a bunch of drugs and like done a bunch of crazy sex and stuff like that prior to becoming Christians. And then my generation was like the generation of like being raised in Christian schools and then either falling away and becoming addicts of some sort or killing themselves or getting married very young and starting families and just kind of maintaining that um no that dynamic, or like eventually like focusing on falling into a marriage and sticking it out and having kids and keeping yourself doing that. Which like the reason I even say it like that is because as much as religious people are very good about communicating deep valid concepts in a deep and valid way, that's where I learned it. But religious people, as opposed to those given to like the humanist, human, any form of humanism, any form of actualism, um, those that are given truly to religion uh, are separated. There's so many different small little distractions. Those that are given to religion, as opposed to those that know themselves and walk actively, are given to being uh, delusional. And not in some crazy like, oh my god, you're so fucking dumb and incapable as a human and like your brain doesn't work. Like it's not like that. Like it's like you're buying into lies. And like you're so convinced that everybody else is buying into lies that like you don't even see it. And like you're so close to the truth, but you're so far from it. And like you're not gonna see it any other way because that's how you view everyone else to be. Um, and like until you view yourself in that constant state, even itself, even the Bible itself, like the truth is in the Bible, it's just not wholly contained in the Bible or only contained in the Bible. The truth is evident to anyone who is willing to actually receive the truth. The thing is that most people don't know how to truly receive. They know how to allow, which is still a level of management, a level of control, a level of ego. If it doesn't come through this vein, then it's bad. It's not right. It's not the right time. This isn't the right thing. There's something else that I got to do. But like, at least where I'm at, uh, everything is about being willing to let go and willing to adapt and willing to not fucking know, have no idea, and just be willing to move based on uh, what is in alignment with you and what is working with you and what is actively in the moment, and being able to trust those things and let it actually cultivate your faith, letting it actually empower you so that you don't live in fear anymore and everything isn't the devil, and like you don't have to be scared of like other religions and stuff, and like you don't have to be scared of knowing things or experiencing things or like enjoying your life, and you don't have to like live your whole life waiting for your death just so that you can go to the better place. Like you actually like realize what a gift it is that you have to be here. I don't know. I just feel like there's so much to unpack here. Okay. There's so much to unpack because there's no way that I'm going to be able to talk about these experiences without getting into like my weird ass concepts of like time and space and history and religion and society and the way that those things like the illusion and the matrix that has been put, that we've been put into, and the illusion that has been put onto us in order to convince us outside of ourselves. And then the process of self-actualization and like the nature of reality and the fucking, like quantum, uh, how would I put it? Like validation of experience, um, and how important those things truly are. Like, because I don't believe in ghosts and I don't believe in demons. But I'm going to tell you some stories about some ghosts and some demons, okay? Okay. This is based on a true story, in the same way that every Hollywood film is based on a true story, where there are things that are real, and then there's things that were like perceived as real, and you can't necessarily tell if they were real or not. And then there's things that like probably weren't real, but they were thought to be real. And then there's things that definitely weren't real. And I'm gonna throw all of that in there. I'm gonna just tell you the stories. But where should I begin? Okay. My dad died when I was born, right? That's like where I start all the time. That's like the biggest, most important experience of my life. The fact that my dad died when I was born and I never knew. That's always where I start everything off. Like, but for real, because I've had, and I even talked about in the last video, I've had this weird relationship with my dead dad my whole life. So like, dead stuff, don't bother me none. From day one, yeah. I mean, not day one, day fucking, 40. I have been very, very close to death. Just it's been part of my life, and um, that wasn't weird. There was always weird stuff that was going on. There was always weird stuff that was going on. Okay, but like most of it was all in my head because of the things that I was experiencing. And I don't fully know the things that I was experiencing because I don't want to think about it. So I don't. I don't think about certain things. I feel certain ways. There's certain things where I'm like, nope, I'm not going to think about that. I don't want to go through that. I'm aware that those are things that I need to go through and process. And maybe this is going to be part of it. Me talking about those things. I don't know. Right. I already said it. I don't know if these things are real or not. Please don't take this as like me calling these people out. If anything, it would be better for you just to assume that I'm crazy. Take this as a story, right? It's just a fantasy story. It's a wild, crazy story. Okay, none of it's true. Okay. My grandma's name is Patricia. My grandpa, my mom's mom. And her dad's name is Bob. And her uncle, my mom's uncle's name is Bob. And her brother's name is Bob. And her daughter's name is Patricia. And my family has a lot of those things. We're like, my Uncle Bob married a Kelly, but we have a cousin Kelly. My Aunt Cindy's daughter. My Uncle Bob also dated a Cindy. Somebody dated a Cindy. There was a Cindy for a short time. There's two Mandys. My Uncle Bob's stepdaughter is Mandy. My Aunt Cindy's daughter is Mandy. Um, there's two Lauras. My mom's sister is Laura. My mom's sister-in-law is Laura. Two Patricias, two Tims. My brother is Tim. Laura's husband is Tim. I think there's Brittany. My cousin is Brittany. My Uncle Bob's daughter is Brittany. And my brother, my oldest brother, Doug's wife is Brittany. I don't know. There's more of it in my family, but it's weird. That shit's weird, right? Um, it's also weird. Dude, there's so much in my life. Holy shit. Okay. That's just like, I'm gonna have to write this shit down. Okay. Um, so that's a weird thing, but the Bob Patricia thing specifically, okay? Not even specifically. The Bob thing is what I was trying to get at. Bob. Bob being a name in the family. That's a weird one. So when I was little, we lived in Burlington, Wisconsin. We lived on Braver Road. It was like this. We didn't live on a farm, and we didn't live near a farm. There was a farm on our road. There was a couple farms on our road, um, and then a barn that had horses. So it was country, but it wasn't like country, right? Like the cows were like a little bit further out into the country, and we were like a little bit closer to the city. But this is before it was all built up like it is now. And Braver Road used to be very small. It has like two interstate overpasses on it now, or some shit. Like two giant highways run through the road I grew up on. It's wild. There's like neighborhoods there and stuff that were never there. We lived on 2 acres. I believe an acre in the front, an acre in the back, or acre and a half in the back, half an acre in the front. And then there was like 4 acres or so of cornfield around us. We had a neighbor to one side that also had several acres. And then our neighbors in front of us on either side were close to each other, but also had several acres themselves. So like we had a lot of space. Um, we definitely had a lot of space growing up there, and that there in Burlington. Burlington is weird. Burlington has a long Wisconsin is weird, but Burlington itself also has like a long history of paranormal activity, UFO activity, all sorts of like demonic witchcraft type of activity. Um, Lots of different things like that. There is a dog man in Wisconsin, a werewolf, or several werewolves that are known in the area, specifically all the way down to northern Illinois, but have been viewed in Burlington. There's, uh, stories of like child sex rings and shit that run through there, drug rings that run through there. There's old history there from the Prohibition and shit. A lot of different old mafia stuff when Chicago was booming, that have run through that area. The whole area in of itself has a lot of history, right? But like Burlington specifically has a lot of weird history. Honestly, Wisconsin is weird. Wisconsin is weird, and most of the small towns have weird history like that. And it's probably because the people aren't in these major cities and shit, right? And they're like kind of country folk, and everybody's probably on meth. Like, it. A lot of it is like you talk to the people, and it's like, okay, but like these people aren't, you know, like I'm not gonna read a fucking research journal by them. So, but I digress. There's a lot of weird shit, and Burlington supposedly is home to a energetic vortex, a sort of what do they call an interdimensional vortex, and that, you know, that's why there's so much UFO activity there, paranormal activity there specifically, that it is like a specific point of magnetism, certain energetic magnetism. There's like a bunch of stuff. There was a UFO cafe there from paranormal like museums and shit where they like, you know, talk about all those things. And we weren't as sheltered then as we became in Paddock Lake. Then my brothers still went to public school. I went to school, but had just started. I was halfway through second grade when we moved to Paddock Lake. So I hadn't really gone to school as much. You know, kindergarten. Kindergarten. I went to 2 places for first grade, and then I went to 2 places for second grade. But so I was young. I lived there until I was 7, turning 8 is when we moved to Paddock Lake. My brothers were older than me. My one brother, Tim, is almost 5 years older than me, and Doug is 6 years, almost, Doug's like 6.5 years older than me. Something like that. So they were older, and because I was the only girl, we were raised different. But like generally speaking, it was a good childhood. I mean, both my brothers have been able to look back on it and like see it from my perspective and like looked at it with empathy. But like at the same time, like I was an idiot and I didn't really know anything then anyways. And like for the most part, like I just was living in 2 worlds my entire life. But like the one world was a good world. It was good. Um, and uh, even that, like obviously I have to get into details about that, but like that I guess will just come with time. Weird things happened in Burlington. Um, Lots of weird things happened. But we were all kids at the time too, and I think a lot of that's almost to be expected, especially when like, you know, you have young developing minds that are like happening to see horror movies for the first time, or like happening to go to school and meet other kids and hear other kids' crazy stories and stuff for the first time. So like there's a lot that goes on as far as like kids are growing, they're developing, whatever weird shit they're putting out there is assumed to just be weird developmental shit, right? Like it almost doesn't matter how weird it is, it almost just seems like a natural part of growing up. Where like now that you can talk about things as an adult, you can look back and be like, oh shit, but like it wasn't like that then, you know. But shit was weird, and we would talk about it. Like our bathroom, for some reason, in the basement, like the toilet would flush by itself, the light would turn on and off. Weird stuff like that, kind of, that would happen in the house. A lot of times weird stuff would happen and we assumed that like it was my mom sleptwalked, especially when she was quitting smoking, she would sleepwalk real bad. So like there was always some sort of reason. You know, we had a dog generally, usually, and like different certain stuff could be explained. And nothing was ever terribly nefarious, or at least it didn't seem to be that way. Um, so it was never like this dark, scary thing when we were growing up. But I would say that even me and, you know, me and my cousins and my brothers would all say that there was still like this weird presence. Well, and I'll later on we actually did end up talking about it, which was weird to me. But like at the time, like yeah, we grew up Christian, so we didn't believe in ghosts. Um, but we still kind of like would make jokes about it and stuff. Like at that point, we didn't fully believe in demons or anything like that. I don't think necessarily either. My parents were new Christians, so like it was more just like when that stuff happened, it was like, oh, it's a weird thing. Maybe it's a ghost. Ooh. And we kind of would make jokes like that even. And like, we had this ghost that we like created. Like my cousins made it up, my uncle made it up, and I bought into it. I believed it. I thought I was seeing it. And they would play with me that way because they thought it was funny, because my imagination was so strong that like I was, yeah, very gullible, and I really would believe things, and I would tell myself that I'd seen things and shit, and I would actually think that I'd seen things because like that's what I was supposed to be doing, you know. And I was very good at that, and they preyed on that, and that was just kind of the relationship that I had with my cousins always. Like I was the youngest, so I constantly got picked on. I just constantly got picked on. My brother even said it the other day where he was like, I can't even say that there was any specific reason that it was you, you know, outside of you being the youngest or whatever, but like I can vouch for the fact that like you specifically took the brunt of our entire family's like bullshit for some reason. Um, and I didn't know any better, so like that's what I was gonna do. I didn't know any better. That was my role. Um, and you know, but there was weird shit that went on in Burlington, especially because like my brother like would talk about like that was when he believed that he had been abducted at one point. I don't know if he still believes that. That there was a extremely long period of time in his adult life, at least. Like I don't know now because he's a Christian now. I don't know if his concepts of those things have changed, but for an extremely long period of time, he, you know, was convinced that he had been abducted multiple times since he was a kid, and could recall a very specific time that I actually recalled too, which was weird because like I think all three of us were together, or I like somehow lived it vicariously through him. It was really weird because when he explained the story to me, like I remembered it, but I had my own experience similar to it later on. Um, so I don't know. We kind of discussed those things. I mean, I don't think that I was abducted. I think that it's more like a guardian angel type deal, I guess. Um, yeah, he remembers like going up and coming down. Doesn't remember being up, but remembers going up and coming down kind of a little bit. And like um, where we were like running out from the river, we were running down the dirt road, and he started to kind of like float. And he remembers like passing out for a while and like waking up and like remembers like the feeling of having floated and floating down or whatever, like being elevated, but then remembers being, you know, like blacked out for a period of time. Um, and that's what most of his experiences are kind of like, where they were almost like a weird dream sort of thing, but like what a weird thing to dream, and for him to have these, you know, multiple different experiences like that, like, you know. And then at one point he had even told me that he believed that like certain people, and my brother got really really into conspiracies for a long time, and he used to tell me about them all the time. He got into them back when he was like 12, 13, 11, 12, 13. He started learning about like the Rothschilds and Bohemian Grove and shit, like all the way back then, which people are just now starting to learn. And I was fucking 7 and 8 when my brother first started learning about that stuff and coming home and telling me about all of it. So I've grown up knowing about these things and learning about these things, and you know, back before like a lot of the stuff was not able to be found on the internet and stuff like that too. You know, we actually would go to the library and find things. That was a big thing that my brother liked to do, and that's what we would do together. I learned a lot and did a lot of research actually with him being very young. um, and we found it very impactful, but like part of it was like he became convinced at a time that he had been marked um, by aliens for abduction and just for research in general. And that's such an interesting concept as I'm saying it out loud, because I myself have believed myself to be marked by my brother and my family, like other outside family, uh, for satanic purposes. And like I said, like I wonder if my brother now is a Christian. um, I don't mean to say that in an offensive way by being like that. I just have these different definitions. But as a Christian, if he believes in aliens still that way, or if he believes it to be demonic, and if so, if he understands now, because of his deep understanding of the occult, um, where a lot of those things are coming from. I believe my brother to have been preyed on far more than I was. I believe that I was considered stupid, and I was. um, there was, it wasn't me. I don't take credit for this stuff. This is all gonna sound very crazy. I don't give a fuck. But like, I was set apart. Like, there was a tidbit of information that was extremely valuable, that needed to be contained for a time, that was like hidden in me and cloaked, um in order until it was time, until it was time for it to come out. um and that's what's like, that's part of the marking. Like, so my brother is marked, and like the way that he was marked is like for testing. um we both were, and it was, I mean, we weren't even considered different at first. To be honest, we were like almost weirdly considered like twins. We were very similar somehow. I don't know, but there was a point in time where, honestly, I think it comes down to gender. I think it's so silly, but I think it comes down to genetics. Think it comes down to DNA, and I think it comes down to the coding. Like, he just happened to be the one that received that other chromosome. So like, he yeah, he just became marked different for that. Like, it wasn't even anything. It might as well have been me or him marked one way or the other. And I think that that's been the struggle for both of us, is the ego attached to it that would make us think otherwise. But like, it wasn't really a personal thing. But like, the way he was marked was, specifically in this time and space for, hmm, he was marked for masochistic purposes, which is so crazy. Because yeah, and I was marked for sadistic purposes, and it's wild because like, we're both of us are we're children of God. Like, and I know that, and I've had that revealed to me. Like, I know my brother, and I've found his spirit elsewhere. I've seen it in every space that I've been, that has been heaven. Like, you know, the reality all exists on top of itself right now. There isn't, some eternity that's happening some other time. It's happening right now. Heaven and hell all exist right now on top of each other, and uh, with the right, um, heart, you can see into other dimensions and into other existences and into other realities in a way that helps you, better wade through this one. The third dimension is extremely dense, and uh, that's the point. It's kind of to muddle all of those different things so that you have to work through it. It's just the experience. Um, yeah, so like, he and I were, um, diametrically divided. Uh, uh, I would say just based on genetics. I think we're actually quite similar otherwise. And I think it's very interesting how much gender affects identity and character that way. Like I said, both of us are children of God. Both of us, don't, uh, we don't have, but that's what's hard, because my mom's succubus is like attached to him fully. Uh, she did that. She did that before he was even born. A lot of moms do that. They plan for the child that they're going to parasitically live off of energetically the rest of that child's life. Um, as long as that child lets it. And generally, if that child's been trained since birth to be that, it's going to be very hard for them to remove that mark. And, it's been weird because a lot of the work that I've done hasn't even been for myself, it's been for my brother, um, to help him. Even way back when, even through so much of the abuses and stuff, like, I've talked about it in other videos and shit, like, even through everything, I always saw my brother. I always knew that he was a child of God and that he was being preyed on even more than me. And that was almost part of the injustice, right? Because, like, I was never being seen. which was frustrating as fuck to just be like, damn, like y'all are really gonna just keep looking at him, like keep looking at him, waiting for him to do the thing, when like the entire time it was supposed to be on me. But like that's the thing about the sadism masochism thing that I was saying, because like him being marked for masochism means that he's marked to be the one that ultimately, when the heart, when the human is broken open into the essence of the being, through death, like his breaking is a pain into itself, where mine as the sadist is a breaking, like through everything else, like outside of, like a breaking into myself almost. um it's outside of that, it's like a breaking of others. It's so wild because I have always considered myself the masochist, right, and my brother to be the sadist, because growing up I was the one that took on the victim mentality and made myself available for abuse, where he became the predator. But that's the actual way that these satanic marks work. That's the way that the energy transference works. It works in the reverse. It is an entire illusion that leads to a delusion that convinces the self of anything other than its truest self. And what that like what the mark does is that as soon as you take on the victim mentality, as soon as you take on being the victim and taking on all of that abuse, now you become responsible for having to take on the responsibility of ridding yourself of the victimization, right? Of the curse was the victimization mentality. But the release of it, or the cultivation of it, one or the other, I mean, they're essentially the same. They're essentially the same. It depends on where your perspective of being able to accept it falls into, more or less, um, is in having to set boundaries against people, having to be the bad guy, having to say things that people don't want to hear, having to be willing to just feel my fucking ways and just be that way, like not being able to be a people pleaser, not being able, being disliked, being hated, being like, you know, people not wanting anything to do with me and having total validation in it. Like that is a hard thing for my ego after taking on that victim mentality my entire life. But that is my process, where my brother's process in having been the predator is now to have to accept that he's been that. It was extremely hard for me to accept that I had been the victim, especially when I was always like, no, I'm trying to see myself as so strong. But as long as I saw myself as the victim, I did not see myself as the survivor. And as long as I continued those mentalities, I continued to victimize myself. By being the predator, you actually are given to the true masochism of becoming the true victim yourself. Ultimately, I'm the beast. I found in my victimization that I was the beast, because I was making allowances for monstrous behavior that had no right to have those allowances. And the only reason those allowances were made was because I was trying to be a people pleaser, because I was in the victim mentality, because I didn't want to be the bad guy, right? Because I'm so good that I can't stand up for those things. And I made allowances for really, really fucked up shit that I should have, all I had to say was no. All I had to do was stand up and say, no, I'm not doing that. I'm leaving. No, you're not going to do that. This isn't going to happen. Leaving, you know? So I ultimately became the monster, where my brother, having done these monstrous things, being the predator, had actually just been demonizing and monstrosizing and dehumanizing himself to the point of having to take on being an actual victim. He only victimized himself, truly, because the rest of us all grew through those experiences. He now, as an adult, struggles with knowing the person that he's been. So, like, that's fucked up, right? And like ultimately, I feel for my brother that that he has just as much of a chance of at balance as I do, but it does come in being willing to be held accountable to those those experiences and those things and those feelings, and to come out of the comfort of being logically dissonant, um, and to come out of the comfort of people pleasing. It don't work either way. The codependency is what's so sick, and the codependency, I mean, it's codependency, it's like the foundation for emotional incest, and the emotional incest is really what fucked us up so much, you know. If it weren't for that, we wouldn't have taken on so many of the physical experiences that we did. um, and that emotional incest and codependency was uh, not only exampled but uh, indoctrinated into us. Like we were taught to be that way, you know, in all these different ways, and then exampled it through our parents' own codependent behaviors. Um, and not only that, but like codependency was rewarded, if not supported, and sense of self, speaking up for oneself, standing in one's own integrity was blocked at best. Um, that's just the structure of the fundamentalism, the fundamentalist theology that my family kind of held to, at least for so long. I think that they've kind of softened up a bit now, but okay, so weird stuff was happening in Burlington. Weird stuff was happening in Burlington, and like I was a happy kid. I was a dumb, happy, goofy kid. I was also very sensitive. I did cry a lot. I was extremely sensitive. Weirdly sensitive, actually. As a little girl, I liked doing things with my brothers. I was a tomboy, but I was also liked dressing like a fairy, and I liked being a princess, and I was very emotional. So I was like always very much both, you know, genders. And um, I was kind of confused about it, mostly because of the way that everybody responded about it. I couldn't just casually be that way. I like had these standards as that I was supposed to keep up with, and like I was expected to be a girl. But what was natural for me was to cater to the masculine, and um, I became a very good man. Uh, but I also became a very good woman. So like I've always been that way. I don't know. Things were weird. Things were weird. Um, my 6th birthday was when we were in Burlington. It's the first traumatic experience I remember, which is weird because I don't remember it. Like, I don't. What I remember is being pulled away from the party. I was having a birthday party because it was my golden birthday. And I remember, like, my mom had invited these people, and my cousins were there, and, like, my friends were there. And I was happy, and I was having a good time. I was fine. Everything was fine. I wasn't thinking about it. I was happy. It was a party. It was supposed to be a party. Um, Maybe I was stressed because my mom was stressed. I kind of don't remember much about early that day because for a second I was like, was I with my grandma even earlier that day so my mom could set up for the party and then she brought me back? Because I remember at one point being pulled away from the party, and I remember being in my brother's room, but I don't remember who it was that I was in there with. Um, and then I remember being in my room too, because I remember coming out of my room, but I remember being in my brother's room at some point too. I don't remember. Because it's hard to, because I don't want to. And because it was when I was 6. Um, but mostly just because I don't want to. Because I've had these weird feelings that my grandpa was somehow involved and that he was involved in other stuff when I was a kid. But I can't remember that. I just remember feeling ways about him and about his dad. And just the whole structure of the family. And the way they all handled that shit. I remember coming back to the party. That's what I remember. I remember somebody coming back to the party, and I remember them walking and going and doing something as if nothing had happened, and just going on about their way. And I remember that making me feel very, very sick in my stomach. And I remember standing kind of like as you came out of the hallway, you would come out into the living room, and the kitchen and the dining room and kitchen were to the left. And the way we had it set up at that time was like the dining room table was here to the left, and then the back door, whatever side door, was kind of right back over there. Um, there was like a water fountain right next to the table on the wall. There was a window right there. The water fountain was right next to the window. Then was the island in the kitchen. And there's the kitchen. Cabinets and shit on this wall. But then in the living room, we had this like light colored couch that was, the back of it was facing me as you come through so as you come out of the hallway, there's like this open space in the living room for walking into here or into the living room. But then we had a armchair of some sort, like right over here. The front door is right here, like over here, the front door. And then there's this little space, and you can see the back of the couch because the couch is facing into the living room. The TV is over in this corner, and then there's like chairs. There's another couch over here, and I think they had a couple chairs even set up like over for extra seating and stuff for people. There's also chairs set up in the dining room, like extra chairs. I think we had a couple like lawn chairs or something set up, plastic chairs. But the way it was set up, we kind of, I guess, moved stuff just kind of to make space for this little bit space of party. Because I remember feeling depressed for the first time, and I didn't know what the feeling was, and it felt very existential, which was extremely, honestly, traumatic to feel at that time. It was such a weird feeling. Um, it was such a bad feeling because I was a kid, and like, I don't know, it was a lot. But I remember looking at my party, and it was like everything was in slow motion. I couldn't like really hear. I was like really in my head, right? And I could see just beyond the couch, like I could see the kids that my mom had invited playing with my toys because we'd just opened my toys, and then this was like then towards the end of the party, and like everybody's like kind of playing, everybody's chilling out now, like nobody's really paying attention to anything anymore. That's when I left, and when I came back, and the kids are playing with my toys, and I remember like looking at the toys because I remember getting it wasn't the electronic one that my grandparents got me, but it was the first Tyrannosaurus Rex that I got, Jurassic Park toy. I remember seeing this kid, the neighbor kid across the street playing with that. He was playing with it with the girl that I grew up with, who was like my best friend, but I didn't even like her, and like I did, but I didn't like, we were like forced to be friends, and so it was just like awkward. And um there was a couple other girls there, and I do actually think that my two best friends from school were there. But I remember even at that time, like looking at them all playing with my toys and looking at them all having fun at my party, and just think like, and I think even like the "It's My Party, I Can Cry If I Want to" song is going on in the back of my head for some reason. But I remember just looking at them and being like these people aren't even really my friends. Like I don't even know these people. These people don't really know me. Like I just felt very, very dissociated and very lost and very uncomfortable. And I remember thinking like, this is my birthday, like it's my golden birthday. This was supposed to, I thought that it was gonna be like I thought that it meant that things were going to get better. Somehow I kept having this idea that like things were just going to magically start getting better and that things were just going to stop happening. Um, the bad things were just going to stop happening. You know what I mean? Whatever the bad things that were happening were. And uh, that didn't happen. In fact, on my birthday, like I remember like just that feeling where it was like, damn, even on my birthday. And that's all I thought about. I don't really, it's weird because like I can like in my head when I'm picturing this, when I'm remembering this, like I am purposefully blocking out the memory of whoever it was that walked into uh, the other room. And why, for some reason now I kind of remember looking over and my brothers are there. They just got their heads shaved. I think my cousin Curtis shaved his head too. I think all of them just got their head shaved. And that was something my dad used to do, was shave their heads all the way like a basketball. And I remember them in there, and like maybe my uncle is there. Maybe my uncle even has his head shaved because he's young, you know, he's only in his 30s at this time. I see my brothers, and I remember because my brother Tim had this gross fucking like caveman toy. It was like this like ball, but he looked like a caveman, and he had like a poopy butt. This thing is weird, but like he had this toy, and he has it, and they're like playing with it. But I think they're bald. I think they got their heads shaved for some reason. It's like I wonder if I could go back down the hall. I don't want to though. There's nothing going on down there. It just makes me feel weird. My brother's room doesn't make me feel weird right now though. It definitely is in my room. Even in my parents' room makes me feel weird too. I think just because we weren't allowed in it very much, but there is a weird sexual warm. I remember their room having like this warm vibe that was weird. That made me feel like I weird. Like it made me feel kind of perverted. I remember when I would go in there like feeling dirty. Like I was a pervert forever. I was always a pervert, so like I liked it. You know, I don't know. I was like 3, 4, 5. My room is fine, but like yeah, sleeping in my room is hard. My room is fine, but I mostly just don't think about it. I'm actually scared in my room a lot. I'm scared of um, there being like crocodiles under my bed or some shit. I'm scared of there being dead people under my bed. I'm scared of there being monsters in my closet. I'm scared of everything as a kid. Like there's something weird about the bed. And especially when it was when you first walked into my room, like okay, so my room was at the end of the hall on the left. I think there was like a weird little pantry or closet or something at the end of the hall. Maybe we had a mirror there or something. And then my parents' room was like not just across, but like almost just across on the right. And then my brother's room was to the next to mine. But my room was at the end on the left. And when you first walked in, for a time, my bed was over on this wall near the closet, which is weird because the closet was on this wall. But it was over under that window. Um, but it wasn't like that for long. I think mostly how I had it was when you first walk in, the bed was right there on that wall. And then like my nightstand, my dresser over here. My dresser's over here. And a couple, I had like a little art station or something. I think I had a little, no. Place to keep my Barbies and my stuffed animals. I like hanging in the on the wall. It's just weird. Like there's been different times where I remember random things and like I don't know. They feel like feelings, right? It's hard to tell. Like obviously as I'm sitting here remembering this, like I can remember it. I can recall it. I'm recalling. But when I'm not actively trying to recall, memories are weird and they feel more like feelings. And then, there's anytime you're talking about child abuse for some reason, the first thing on people's minds, and it's because of fucking brainwashing, but the first thing on everybody's minds is fake memories. Yeah, everybody knows about fake memories. Like, this was never a thing until, like, talking about child abuse became really popular after, like, child sex rings started to get really, really popular. But fake memories and, like, people implanting memories and, like, thinking that they've been abused when they really haven't. It's, like, this whole thing, right? So, like, try very hard not to do that. I don't know how much of this is that. But weird stuff was happening in Burlington. And then we moved to Paddock Lake, and I was 7, turning 8. I remember when we moved there, and I was so happy. I remember at one point, like, we were moving in all the beds and shit, and we had laid my mattress, like, on the wall, and it kind of slipped down, and I jumped on the mattress, and it kind of slipped down, and I remember, like, laying on it while it was, like, partially on the wall while they were bringing stuff in, and I was looking at this new house, and I was like, this is gonna be good. Like things are gonna change. Like, it's gonna be better now. I think I thought that whatever the negative energy was in the house. Maybe I was fucking 7. I don't really know what I thought, but I remember that when we moved, I thought, like, okay, things are going to be better now. The same sort of way that I thought when I turned 6 for some reason they'd be better. Well, now we're moving, so now they should definitely get better, right? I think mostly what was going on at this time was my brother molesting me, which we have talked about. I've talked about in these videos, but my brother and I have even talked about. I've talked about with my family and stuff. Like, I think that's mostly what was going on, and I was just being very deflective of it at the time. But my brother had also been assaulted, and, like, not just by the couple people that, like, we've talked about, he and I. Like, I know there was other stuff going on. I know I was exposed to other stuff, but I think he was exposed to more. I think I was exposed to stuff through him being exposed to stuff. And I think then he exposed me to stuff. Um, the details of all of those things are blurry and also just hard to communicate and talk about. Nobody really wants to hear any of those things, except fucking perverts. And I'm a pervert, right? But I'm not a fucking predator. And even my predatory behavior it's not, it's not. So, I don't know. I thought things were going to get better, but they didn't. In part, that might very well have just been that I was being molested by my brother. Wasn't fully. I'd acknowledged it. I'd brought it up to my mom. Her response to it. I brought it up to my mom when I was 5. It was making me feel some type of way, and I couldn't keep feeling that way. I'd been hiding it for a long time at that point. Been hiding it for a couple of years, and I didn't want to keep experiencing it, and I didn't know. It didn't feel right anymore. It didn't feel okay. It never felt right, but I learned that I wanted to communicate that. And I told my mom about it, and her response was, my brother, I'm 3 to 5, so my brother is 7 to, like, 9, 10, 8 to 9, 7 to 9, 10, something like that. At the time, 8 to 10, 8 to 12, something like that. Yeah, 8 to 10. So, he's still young. He's still a kid too. He's a young kid. I'm just a younger kid. And when I tell my mom, like, she's like, well, that, I was like, I was expressing a feeling of having been victimized. And she assured me that wasn't, this is my brother. Like, that he wasn't trying to victimize me. He wasn't trying to hurt me. He wasn't trying to be monstrous. That she understood that it gave me a really icky feeling, but that wasn't what he was trying to do, that he was just doing what boys do. And, that was pretty much her response to it. I conceded and accepted it. That's just what boys do. And she didn't mean it any harm. She was trying to protect her son, who she saw as being potentially even victimized himself, I think, at the time. But I think even just that, she had seen him as her innocent son and was like, well, he's definitely not a predator. All I hear when you say that is that my son's a predator and he's not a predator. She heard my son is not a predator, or like, she heard my son as a predator more than she heard my daughter as a victim. extremely hard situation. I have had periods of time in my life where I've held that against her, but for the most part, it's been something I've carried with me because it was extremely important to me at the time to receive some sort of support and information, and that was the support I received. So like I carried that with me, and I that excused a lot of the assaults that I experienced up until I was an adult and started just to take better responsibility. Because I truly just thought that that was just what dudes do. That's just what dudes do, and that's what they do. You gotta you got to allow it or don't. But it's not like they're out here just trying to be evil and shit like that. Like they're just sexually predatory, and that's how I was taught. And I was taught that pretty blatantly. I mean, my dad had no problem talking about the sexual predatoriness of men. Um, it was to be expected, um, and that was the importance of women being a certain way and women conducting themselves a certain way, was to ensure that men didn't have an excuse to be those ways because otherwise they would be, and then they had an excuse. Um, so yeah, needless to say, moving into Paddock Lake, things just kept getting weirder. I started getting severely depressed at that point. Now, obviously, I was already leading into depression. Um, but this by the time I was 8, and we had fully moved in, and I had started a new school. I'd started going to the Christian school at this point. um, I was suicidal. I became suicidal at 8. Was when it started. Like I said, my depression started at 6, but my suicidal ideation began at 8. That's when it started a little bit before then. I think it started at 7, or progressively from 6 to 7. But I was waiting, and I think that the moving I thought was going to be that thing that kind of shifted that, and instead it didn't. So that's when the ideation got real strong. Um, and the first time I tried to kill myself, I was 8. I didn't know what I was doing. I was mad. I was frustrated. I was extremely emotional. Um, I think I'd gotten in trouble at school or something. I had behavioral issues in my early childhood and school years for sure. I was a bully. I was a piece of shit. I was not nice. I was not nice. I was constantly getting in trouble for not getting along with people. I was constantly getting in trouble at school, getting in trouble by my parents, getting grounded and whooped and shit for being extremely mean to people. I was, yeah, I was not nice. I was kind of a violent kid. Um, yeah, I was messed the fuck up, to be honest. There have been plenty of signs of that too. I mean, even in like in kindergarten, in first grade, and in second grade, at all 4 of those schools, because I went to 2 different schools for first grade, and then I went to 2 different schools for second grade. But kindergarten, first grade, and second grade, the beginning of second grade, were all at public schools, and at those public schools, every single one of them, the counselors mentioned my behavioral issues, mentioned my need for counseling, my need for therapy, a strong, uh, like recommendation for those types of things. My parents were like, not our daughter. I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. These people are crazy. They're just trying to, they're just secular people in the world trying to get our child caught up in the demonology that is psychology. So they put me in Christian school, and then you never heard about my mental health again. Meanwhile, it did not get better. It actually got significantly worse. Like I said, when I was in public school, and there was a sense that people cared at all about what was going on in my personal life, and I wasn't just being sheltered from it. Um, I was maintaining that as soon as we went into the Christian school, and as soon as we moved into that smaller space, as soon as I became that sheltered and realized that not only were things going to not change, they were going to get much worse, that's when I started trying to kill myself. And that persisted for fucking 20 years, 20 plus years. 20 years, I would say. The last time I actively, like I said in my other video, I had tried to drink myself to death essentially in 2020, but I didn't actually, because as soon as I started getting drunk, I started actually enjoying being drunk. So what I was hoping to do was drink myself to death, but instead it ended up being a good thing for me. But prior to that, the last time I tried to kill myself was in 2018, and I had been hospitalized for that. I'd been hospitalized 4 times between 2016 and 2018 for trying to kill myself. And that was only after things had cultivated to the point of me like really not fucking around anymore and really trying to do it. Prior to that, it had always kind of been like, even when I did it when I was 8, like I wasn't really trying to do it. I was just tempting myself with it. And then I became extremely overwhelmed because I realized that like I didn't know. I grabbed a kitchen knife and was going to try to stab myself, and I was like first going to cut my wrists, and then I couldn't figure out how to do it, and I was like, damn, like that's going to be so hard. Like maybe if I just stab myself in the stomach. And my idea was that I was going to sit there and just stab myself in the stomach. And I remember like poking myself even in the stomach and just like crying and putting it up to my throat, and then being like, no, that wouldn't be, I don't think I'd be able to get all the way through before I'd actually like kill myself. I was like, think stabbing myself in the stomach would be best. And I remember sitting there and thinking about it, 8 years old with a kitchen knife in my bedroom, seriously considering stabbing myself in the stomach repeatedly. And I'm talking about like, I grabbed like the big ass fucking kitchen knife, right? My psycho ass. And I was just crying. And yeah, I like cut my stomach a little bit and decided not to. So I pussied out. It hurt. I remember being like, God, I'm not even going to be able to kill myself. Like, I'm not strong enough to kill myself. I'm just going to have to suffer. And that's kind of what it felt like, mostly throughout my teens. I kept like tempting myself with it. Just tempting myself with it and not being able to follow through. Started cutting pretty early, 12, and started using a razor blade at 16, 15, 16. I mean, that was about it. It pretty much just kept up like that. My sexual behaviors had always been an easy way to destroy myself, so that's kind of what I stuck to. That and like fast food addiction. The caffeine was actually to make me feel good. Um, the nicotine, the pot, those things always made me feel good, but the fast food was definitely a way I was self-destructing. The sex was always a way I was self-destructing. Um, there was so much weird stuff that was going on though. That's like real stuff, right? I'm still trying to talk about the fucking paranormal shit. So like, even back then, even before we moved to Paddock Lake, my brother was already getting into conspiracies. But as soon as we moved to Paddock Lake, that was like the right around the year that he really started to get into conspiracies with his friend Josh. Um, and not just conspiracies, he was getting into like he started learning about the occult. He started learning about witchcraft and shit because he started learning that the world is run by a satanic elite. So then he started learning about sadism, and then he started learning about Luciferianism because he started learning about Freemasonry, and then he started learning about Luciferianism, and then he started learning about like Gnosticism and Hermeticism a bit. He didn't really get into a lot of the occult of it. He really got into the UFO thing, right? Then he's like really up on the UFOs. And like believing that he's marked by the UFOs and stuff. So that's like why he got into that. Which is why I also got more into learning about the occult and learning about the way that satanic cults work and their marking of people for witchcraft and shit like that too. Same reason, just took it a different route, I suppose. Shit was wild. So yeah, weird stuff already happened in Burlington, but then we moved to Paddock Lake and weird shit starts happening more and more. To the point where like not much, I guess, when I was younger. I don't really remember. The thing was that like up until we got out of school, there was a lot of other like life stuff that was happening. So like a lot of the and as long as my brothers were at the house even, like things were different. We'd experience things. My brothers would hear things. We'd all hear like disembodied voices, or like things would be moved around, or like things would be left open, or, you know, like just weird shit like that, or like, you know, um, you'd find like random notes and shit written around, like things are just random weird things like that. Um, Nothing too terribly nefarious, but as I got older, it started to get worse and it started to get scary. And like even as my brothers lived there, it would get scary. My oldest brother really tried not to acknowledge any of it, but my middle brother, being convinced of all the UFO shit and everything, uh, liked to engage in those types of things. And that was one thing my parents always said was like, just don't, we don't talk about it. We're just not talking about any of these things. We're not going to talk about it because that just gives it power. So like we didn't discuss what was happening. We would say like, oh, did you hear that? Oh, did you feel that? Oh, did you see this thing? Oh, hey, this crazy thing just happened. And be like, okay, well, just don't talk about it. And that's how we'd handle it. And it was happening all the time. And it would just became common. It was normal. Most of my friends, and I'm sure my brother's friends felt the same way, but most of my friends that came over to that house all experienced something at some point, something weird that made them kind of creeped them out. Um, a couple of my friends told me different stories. My one friend, Andy, specifically, because I remember her, we experienced a couple weird things together, multiple times that we were together. But like, specifically, there was one time when she was over there where she was, we were upstairs, we were in the family room, just hanging out. She started playing the piano. She was a pianist. And she started playing the piano and was singing a song. And I was like, hey, I'm going to go get us some drinks. You know, do you want to drink? And she was like, yeah. So I went downstairs to go get us some soda. And I came back upstairs and startled the shit out of her when I came in the room. I just came up the stairs and came in the room and she got startled. And I was like, the fuck? And she's like, did you? She's like, you really just went downstairs and got soda? I was like, yeah, I told you that's what I was going to do. I thought she was upset because I had missed the song. And she was like, I was like, I told you that's what I was going to do. And she was like, no, she's like, I know. And I saw you leave. But she's like, I thought that what you did was like left and then stood, like didn't actually leave. And she was like, because she's like, I thought that I heard you go down the stairs. She said, but when you left, it felt like you didn't leave. It felt like you left and that then it felt like you were like still right outside the door. And she's like, I thought I heard you go down the stairs, but then when I like felt that you were still by the door, I thought that maybe you didn't go down by the stairs. And she's like, so I just kept playing. And she's like, as I was playing, I swore that out of the corner of my eye, I saw you standing in the doorway listening to me, like standing there watching and listening. And I thought that that's what you were doing and that you were just trying to kind of have like a candid listen of me playing the piano. So I was just like playing for you candidly. So like it really startled me when you came in. Which was wild because, right, like she had literally seen like a shadow figure standing. She thought that it was me and it wasn't. But there was other experiences like that where like we'd be sitting, like there was one time I was with my friend Amber and we were sitting, Amber Nemi. I don't know if she'd remember this, but we were there smoking one time and she was sitting right next to me on the couch. It was in the family room too. It was like once we bought this house. That's a whole, okay. Amber Nemi and I are sitting there and we're smoking, and at one point like we were talking about ghost stories or something like that too, where she had mentioned something or like how something, I'm talking about ghost stories, she felt a cold, like it felt like a cold like over her lap, like if something very cold just like moved over her lap for a second and it like gave her chills. But I was sitting directly next to her and I was warm, like I didn't feel shit at all, no draft or anything like that whatsoever, and it really creeped her out. um stuff like that would happen like to other people too, but to me too, like those types of experiences. So when other people experienced them too, I'd be like, yeah, sorry, I don't know what to tell you, the house is weird. um and I had people that like didn't really like to come over, or people that did like to come over but only to chill, and they'd be like, okay, your house is weird. But our family was weird and the vibes were weird anyways, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, but that was the thing. So when we first bought the house, like, I'm under the impression we got it for a good price. My dad is a contractor. So my dad was a construction worker, you know, a contractor. And he had worked for my grandpa's company at the time, my mom's dad's company. But then he ended up owning his own company, which was also for contracting. And like his concept was that like he was gonna build, or he was gonna buy this fixer upper and build on it and just reconstruct it, for us. And that's what he did. Um, First, he took down the garage, which they had said that they found a whole bunch of weird shit in the garage. The garage was detached, like, like half a lot away from the house. He tore that down and built another house right there, and we were going to move into that house, but then it ended up costing too much to build fully for us to move in. So then he just rebuilt onto our house and developed our house up. So even when we first moved in, he kind of like, he took out the wood paneling, he changed the carpets, he repainted some things, and I think he did take out one wall and adjust one wall in the kitchen area. So he did do some construction direct, like right away in the house, and it did disturb the vibe of the house. And then it did, but then when he built that second story, like even during that time, it became a really wild time. Like it took forever for him to be able to finish that because there was just all these different issues that we kept coming across. Shit just kept being really, really wild. And like my mom became extremely like unbearable during that time. She had had a couple major surgeries then at that point and was like fucked up on her painkillers, I think, for a while. But like my dad was trying to build on this house to make her happy, but she wasn't happy, and then he wasn't happy, and everybody was fucking depressed. And then he finally built the second story, and like built on that. I think I was 13. Oh yeah, so my mom hadn't even had the surgeries yet. Yeah, so stuff was already setting in because my mom had the surgeries when I was 12 or 13. Um, right around the time my dad must have finished like directly afterwards, maybe. And then yeah, because it was part of my 13th birthday. Like my mom wasn't there for my birthday, 12th or 13th. I think it was my 13th birthday. She was in the hospital, and then she got really sick, and then she had another major surgery. So she was literally in the hospital almost the entire time I was 13, and then she had to go back to work. Which she didn't have to work the whole time that my brothers were growing up. So like that was something too. Like she wasn't there. Um, she apologized for that. Like she wanted to be and stuff. That was just where we were at. We were poor then. Like much, we had to, at that point. And then, my dad was still doing good with his business. It was just things were tighter and they were paying for private school now and shit like that too, I guess. And because, yeah, I think my brother just graduated high school and then my other brother's still in high school. So my oldest brother moved out of the house and my other brothers still live there. And Tim lived in the basement at this time, and I'm living upstairs. I actually think that Tim lived in the room upstairs too. Tim lives in the room that becomes the family room. My dad basically kicks it out from being Tim's room because he had to recarpet it because Tim destroyed the carpet. It was but one or the other. Either it had been a family room and then became Tim's room, or it was Tim's room and then became a family room. Either way. And then I lived up there too. But things were really weird then. Like after the construction happened, like it was so strange because the entire top half of the house felt new. It was new. It literally smelt new. It smelled like fucking drywall and paint. You know what I mean? Like, and my dad like spent this time to like paint my room real fancy, like a princess room. I had like green, yellow, orange, and pink stripes on the wall and shit. And like he tried really hard to make that like really nice, and then he had his office up there and he painted it like money green, and he was like, he had all these good ambitious ideas. But yeah, things were somehow getting weird in the house more and more, and like after it was all built was when like I started like hallucinating and shit. Like I had seen things and stuff when I was a kid, and I'd been scared of things, and I'd like when we first moved in Paddock Lake, when we first moved to Paddock Lake, I started having nightmares. I was scared of stuff when I was younger at Burlington. But as soon as we moved into Paddock Lake, I was like, maybe it's just because I was older, but that paranoia turned into something different. Because I remember like seeing my dead grandpa in the closet, even though my grandpa was alive at the time. Seeing my dolls come to life, so I had to put them down in the basement. I couldn't have anything to do with them anymore. They terrified me. Um, Different stuff like that was going on right away. I had a nightmare of trolls. I remember having a couple nightmares of trolls, which I actually think I had when I was younger too. Just these weird little gremlin like beings that like would come towards the foot of my bed. And then like these like like lofty shadow characters that would like hang over my bed and watch me while I slept. And those things just got more intense as we moved to Paddock Lake. Um, and like I said, to the point where like, okay, well, within the first year of moving there, I'm 7 and 8 years old. I'm 8 years old now, right? Um, I'd always kind of, because of the sexual stuff that I had been given to at a very young age, and because of like my brother molesting me and shit, like I would masturbate as young as 3, 4, 5. I was already masturbating. But at 8 was when I started actually penetrating myself. I know that's a lot of fucking information, and I don't mean to be inappropriate, but like it's the truth, and it's fucking wild because that I wasn't I was innocent. I was an 8-year-old child, but like at the same time, like I wasn't innocent. You know, my innocence had been taken in these different ways, and I was breaking my own innocence. You know, and that's wild. And it's like it's crazy because I know kids that age. You know, and I wouldn't want to think that any child that age is doing the things that I was doing at that age. But like, yeah, at 8, I was penetrating myself and I was actively trying to kill myself. So like, please watch out for your kids. Please pay attention to your kids. Please don't think that just because they're children, they're incapable of extremely deep experiences and emotions. Because I was. Um, and it immediately became weird. It was weird. It was like this thing that I like had to do to myself. It became very compulsive right away. My brother was having me look at porn, or he was having me draw porn for him and stuff, and those things kind of just kept evolving into their own little weird perversions. And then we got a computer when I was like 10, and I immediately started getting on porn. By the time I was 12, I was completely addicted to online porn. Like anytime I was on the internet, I was having to watch porn. I was sneaking it even if people were around just to be able to see it. Like I was compulsively having to watch it any chance I could get. It was fucked up, and it was like that for years. I went to a 12-step program when I was 20 for my porn addiction, so it went on for 8 years. Pretty rapidly, pretty vapidly, I should say. um, yeah, shit was weird. Shit was weird, and there was a lot of weird shit going on. Oh, it's like I've only just begun. And this is probably, I don't think this video is going to last much longer because I think my battery's going to die. So I guess I'll just leave it there for right now. At least I got an idea of what it is I'm trying to start talk about. Um, I'm just going to, the next video, I'll just start from Paddock Lake and go from there. I don't, I would love to make this a lot easier to listen to, a lot funner to listen to, put some sort of animation to it, make it, we're working with it. If you've been watching this, I hope that you're getting anything of value out of it. I don't know. That's what I got. We'll see where it goes from here.